Welcome everyone, and I am Sanjukta Mukherjee, a social entrepreneur working with Just Transitions, and it is my privilege to talk to Dr. Ghosh today. Dr. Ghosh, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us about the Boston Pledge initiative that took place on January 23rd, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. This year. Congratulations for adding a new chapter of hope in the history of South Asia. The topic of that conference was uncovering the hidden assets of South Asia to trigger bottom-up socio-economic surge. A very, very important and significant situation that we need to delve into. I find it my privilege to ask you a few questions regarding that particular event. So could you tell us what was the significance and occasion of this session?
Thank you, Sanjukta. It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you and explore the event as it unfolded. But first, as you know, the Boston Pledge is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. We had an amazing journey since its beginning in 2001. And that journey included serving people at the base of the pyramid in various parts of the world, particularly in India, in Bengal. We organized almost every 3-4 times every year, several workshops to serve the people at the base of the pyramid, empower them so that they could indeed become enterprising. So that journey has obviously made us even more ambitious that this should spread across South Asia. And since it's the 20th year, we want to do it with a bang, with the hope that in the world that we are living, where borders are becoming less and less important, what is more important is the human being at the core of the world, and there are 7.5 billion people, how we could reach out, particularly to those who feel underprivileged, who we could perhaps trigger the confidence, the inner power, so that they could find their future, define their future, and in the process build a great society. So yes, this is a very important year for Boston Pledge, and this was the first event, and I hope this event would trigger all of us who are the members of the Boston Pledge, as well as the people we serve, so together we can create a bigger civilization.
That's wonderful to know, and congratulations on this very, very important first step. And here's wishing, more accolades and success on the way. You have played key advisory role for state heads in over a dozen nations and top business leaders globally. And in this session, speakers like the former advisor to Prime Minister of India, Governor to Reserve Bank of India, social scientists, National Chief of Security Exchange of Bangladesh, CTO of the world's sixth largest IT company, the largest industry federation of India, professors of eminent universities were present. What do you think about the views that were expressed by them in this particular session?
I particularly feel very humbled first that we could pull together some of the great thinkers, doers of our times from different parts of South Asia. So first, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank them to be able to offer their thoughts and time to make the January 2030 event a very special one. When I think through all in terms of what they have shared with us, while all of them are very important, but they were indeed very complementary. And I would perhaps organize what I learned and what I think the audience learned from listening to them, that there were 3 different levels of inputs. One, I would say philosophical. The second one was more strategic in nature. And third one, operational And then cutting through it, there was a financial dimension to it. And let me see whether I can quickly summarize. When I think of the philosophical aspect, it definitely came from Dr. Sam Pitroda, when he emphasized that we are living in a world of hyperconnectivity, and perhaps the implications of borders as was drawn after the Second World War or influenced by capitalism, which developed in the West, is going to become less and less relevant. And we have to think in terms of new ways to connect beyond borders. And in that spirit, I think he laid a very good foundation of the spirit of the conference of looking at South Asia in its totality. Then, if I think of the next level, which I will call the strategic level, we had three individuals talk about different aspects of what are the challenges of building a great South Asian region. Dr. Subbarao, the ex-governor of Reserve Bank of India, definitely made a very powerful point. Eh, Building a region like South Asia would require a very careful balancing act of where how to define what is the right interest. If you are retired, you want higher interest rate. If you are young and want to start a business, you want a lower interest rate. And if you are poor, you want free capital. If you are rich, you want to maximize the value of capital. And obviously in South Asia, given the nature of the diversity and the limited resources, managing monetary policy has to be done with a strategic mindset. Yet on one side, we have to be practical, yet we have to be transformational. I think that was brilliantly done by Dr. Subbarao. And obviously, having worked with people like, which used to be my friend also, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, I think he brought a lot of practicality into the discussion. In the same spirit, Mr. Dilip Chinoy, who represented the FICCI as Secretary General, he made a very important point, which I have been thinking for a long, long time. We have a population which is close to 24% of the global population in South Asia. India's got about 1.35 billion people, but we really do not have a brand beyond the Royal Bengal tiger, which is known all over the world, or ISKCON, or Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity, or Ramakrishna Mission for that matter. But interesting enough, these are all from Calcutta area, but we really don't have a brand. So I think challenge for businesses is how to build a trust-based relationship, firstly in their own region, then across the nation, across the region, and they go all over the world. So I think that was a very important point Mr. Chinoy made. And then Dr. Shibli Rubiat al-Islam, I think he made a good point as Bangladesh as a model, because seems like in the last 4 or 5 years, a bottom-up approach of Bangladesh's development in the garment sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, seemed to be working. Then maybe thanks to the work that has been done in the name of Grameen Bank, that is working. So obviously, he highlighted some of the good points in Bangladesh, which could perhaps be a source of inspiration for the rest of South Asia. And so these were I would say, fall into the strategic case. And then when I heard about Dr. Imran Saeed and Anjum Malik's presentation, I felt very positive that there are indeed some very interesting work, like Sangyukta, you are doing in Bengal, that there are specific initiatives in the area of education, which Imran Saeed talked about, or Anjum Malik is doing social entrepreneurship in Sindh, and he's talking about how both of them are impressed with the kind of people they're meeting and the nature of the work they're doing. I really hope Boston Page would be able to work with both of them, like we are working with you, Sanjukta, to spread this all across South Asia. So that's why my kind of takeaway of the three levels. And then Jahangir Sultan did a very good job to basically say that, look, all is good, but unless we can develop credibility outside. When people measure the risk profiles of the nations in South Asia, we do not look good. We do not look trustworthy. As a result, the credit ratings are low. As a result, the nature of investment that comes into the region is significantly lower. I know the numbers. particularly if you look at a per capita basis, is very low compared to the money that has gone to China, the money that is going to Vietnam, or many various parts of Africa. So this is how I would summarize that. Lot of very rich points were covered by various individuals who joined the Boston Pledge Conference.
Great. So that was a very crisp highlighting of all the mature and value-added discussions that happened that day. Thank you very much. I would request your team, Professor Ghosh, to share the link with us. So, I mean, more people can log in and watch the discussions. Thank you.
Sure.
Your dedication to public service all over the world, I mean, coming from India and coming from West Bengal, it reminds me of the great souls like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Swami Vivekananda, Tagore, and others. And for that matter, as a global citizen, I know that you look up to heroes like Ataturk and Roosevelt, Mao Zedong, JFK, Tokugawa, Lee Kuan Yew. What would you say was your message for social, business, and political leaders of South Asia, particularly standing in this century at a very, very critical juncture?
That's a very rich and deep question. Let me see what I can build. Firstly, I feel humbled that the names that you mentioned, and you see my commitment of the nature of the individual's names that you mentioned. I don't know, perhaps I am about 0.01% of the personalities that you mentioned, but that's fine, because that means I've got a long way to go, and I hope with your support and help, I could reach the levels of Swami Vivekananda or Tokugawa or Ataturk. But one thing which I want to highlight, all these individuals that you mentioned, there were 2 or 3 common denominators, and that inspires me. Firstly, when they started their journey, they started with a very humble beginning. It was not a huge organization with which Mao Zedong started. It was just 3 young boys who started a movement and brought a fundamental change in China. Same you could say about Lee Kuan Yew when he took charge of Singapore. Singapore was literally a small village or a small town. He built it up into a huge city and created the spirit of Singapore. So I feel, and similarly, Netaji Vivekananda, all of you know, I mean, Netaji was not appointed by anyone. He left the Congress Party and went around all over the world to organize people to fight for independence. So did Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He moved around from India to England to Ireland to create a movement against Shati. So I think I find such individuals indeed a source for inspiration for me. I study their lives repeatedly and try to find out what could I do in my personal endeavors so that I could collate such a kind of spiritual, intellectual, physical, emotional energy. We need all the 4 types of energies coming together. And when these energies come together, we create perhaps a movement, which we are trying to do with Boston Pledge, with you and every member of the Boston Pledge and the people who support us from distance, to create a movement which can make the world a better place. And why shouldn't we do that? Because that's fun. You can do something which is beyond thinking about yourself. And in the process, you get to know yourself very, very much. I believe the Boston Pledge is a place of self-reflection, self-discovery, and self-expression. This is how we get a chance to express whatever little that we could do for society.
That's wonderful. I think the Boston Pledge has created a wonderful discourse. And from, getting a lot of collaborative, and you have consolidated over the last 20 years of different people speaking diverse languages, working in diverse fields into a common platform. And I can only hope that it'll grow bigger and achieve the common transformative changes that are required. uh, with dialogue building, there is the next step is action. So I would take the privilege of asking you what you think the next steps would be.
Maybe I should step back a little bit. Let me summarize my presentation, because I talked about the people that we invited into the conference. But if you think of the presentation that I made, it had 3 points. The first point was the world is at crossroads, and civilization is a point of inflection. And in making that point, if you recall, I made the point that the geopolitical disorder taking place, the order that existed till about 1992 between USSR and the United States, the NATO, the triad, which is US, Europe, Japan, and there was OPEC. There was a uneasy but orderly tension, which we call the Cold War. But following 1992, things started breaking up. And if you look at the world today, there are a lot of different tensions. There's a tension between China and the US. Within Europe, there's a tension. Brexit is happening. There's a lot of tension in the Middle East, a lot of tension within Africa, a lot of tension in South China Sea, Korea, and then, of course, our neighbor in Myanmar, Rohingya crisis. So if you really think about it, the world is in a state of really turbulence, crisis. And then we see there's a challenge between capitalism and socialism. Both of them are not working. Globalism versus nationalism, autocracy versus democracy. So every dimension, there is a fundamental questioning taking place. So the one point I wanted to highlight, which I made in my presentation, the world is looking for a new direction. And could South Asia provide that direction? That was my first point.
Yes.
Because South Asia, after all, is a 7,000-year-old region, has a lot of different kinds of wisdom, culture, faith, thoughts, mathematics, science fermented. Now, I think the world is looking for a new kind of wisdom. Could South Asia come together to create that ferment which could become a model for the world? So that was my first point. Now, the second point I put up, as you know, that currently the way South Asia has performed, it is extremely weak. If you look in terms of Human Development Index, we are 130. India is 130, Pakistan is 145, Bangladesh is in 130s. That is unacceptable, whether you think from the point of view of sanitation, education, corruption, pollution. The region is not doing well. In fact, it is towards the lower end of the spectrum when you rank 184 countries. When you look at trade, this region has got negative trade balance. Now that is something all of you should be worried about, because when a country is poor, which means the wage rates are low, the businesses should be able to manufacture products which they can sell all over the world. But unfortunately, this part of the world buys more from outside than sells more. So trade balance is negative, and trade balance negative means that we do not earn our foreign reserves. Our foreign reserves are determined by people investing, which can also disappear when people lose trust in the region, the point Jahangir was making. And then the third point, which worries me the most, is corruption. When the perception of corruption in a country or a region is high, the common people in the ground, they do not feel inspired. And the final point that I made was nutrition. 9.1% of the nation's population gets the right kind of nutrition. 91% don't. If you look at, in absence of nutrition and inspiration, and absence of education, the right kind of education, lack of sanitation, all the words which ends with TION is missing. It's very difficult to build a country. So I think we have a common problem, which is to fix the basic socio-economic infrastructure. And then we have a common asset, which is the heritage, wisdom, So on one side, we have to uplift the wisdom and heritage that we have, which we also do not care much. On the other side, we have to uplift the socioeconomic lives of common people. So that led to my third point, and I think I introduced 6 industries to focus on, which I call the green economy, the blue economy, and the gold economy. Green is a revival of the agro with really a lot of romanticism into it, that we want to be the most productive part of the world in using our land. And why not? Because our population density is the highest, so we have to be very careful that our land is very dear, so we have to make much more out of our lands. We've got a lot of water, we are in a peninsula, we have got ocean, aquaculture, mining in the water, sports. There are a lot of different things that we could develop using the waterways, the riverways, the canals, so that transportation becomes significantly more easier. And the final point also we made was the 2 other industries, what I call heritage systems engineering and human care engineering. So this way we are really taking care of people, not healthcare, but human care, so that indeed people lead a very healthy, meaningful lives. And the 6th industry we talked about, revival of the food and beverage industry, so that we could really change the diets of people in South Asia. Because 9.1% of the people get the right kind of nutrition and 91 doesn't, we have a serious problem. So that was kind of the summary of the presentation. So as you could see, the reason I talked about it, given the inputs that we received from the invited speakers and the presentation that I made, we have got a lot of work to do. So the next step is very straightforward. We would organize one initiative for each of these 6 cases within the Boston Bridge umbrella. And Sanjukta, obviously you're invited to join any one of them or all of them. One is, could we create a special initiative in the green economy, which we call, and we have got a project in Lakkikantapur, which our colleague Devender would be involved. Could we create a project in the blue economy, which is, what could we do more with our waters? You know, water is a tremendous resource, particularly in Bengal, in Punjab, in different parts of India. You know, we have water. On the other side, we are very poor in managing rivers. As you know, the river Jamuna is drying up. So I think we have got a lot of work to do in water management. And then we will do a project on gold management, which is solar energy. So that again, we want to do a project in Lakkikantapur, create a village which runs only on solar, and then we can franchise this model. So these are the next steps we have in mind. And then we'll do in this year a few more projects, like Anjum and Devender will organize a project specifically, and maybe Sanjuda, you should join that one, is on social entrepreneurship, how to promote more social entrepreneurship. We'll talk about Willflow, we'll talk about some other companies and see how they could be made world-class companies. So that's the long answer to your short question, but I thought it's important that we bring it all together into one construct.
Wonderful vision board, linking to the past, looking at the synergies that existed in Asia, and bringing it forward to this, age of disruption, and then finally a vision of a stronger unification. I thought it was wonderful, and from all of the people from this part of the world, of a great, great wishes for envisioning and creating on the ground what you spoke about. All the best wishes. And with that, I would like to thank you once again for taking time out of your very busy schedule and having this discussion with me. Thank you, Professor Ghosh.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My privilege.
Thank you.